So hello and welcome to this video on the Antimatter audio Crossfold. Now the Crossfold is a rather unique wave folder in that we get two inputs and a CVable crossfade between the two inputs, a folder mount with CV as you'd expect, a range control which sets the scope of the folding and how many stages of folding are used, which goes up to 8, and a mix again which we can CV. We've got a switch to set what the dry left hand side of that mix is. In XF it's the output of this crossfader. So we could just use this as a crossfader, keep it dry, CV between two sounds or CV sources. And for the size, it's a great little crossfader as well. But of course, you can still blend over then to the folded version. When we set it in the middle to the V position, this is used like a VCA. There's no dry input, so that mix can just be used like an output VCA, should you wish. All the way right, set to the 1 position. This is always just input 1. So you could have the cross-folding of a second input by crossfading over to the second in, folding it, and then blending between input 1 unfolded and 2 folded. It's a really quite creative and powerful unit. So let's get into how it sounds. We'll also check this out with some drums, some bass lines, drones, all sorts of stuff. So let's get stuck in. So here I have a lower pitch triangle wave, which is the first input and the top green trace on the Modax data scope. The second input is the blue trace, a higher pitched sine wave, tuned to an interval. Not entirely in tune, you can see they're moving around a little bit, but it's working. And then my output is the yellow trace at the bottom. Because the switch is set to XF, this is going to crossfade across from both inputs. So that's input 2. Together, as I said, they're a fairly nice interval. And input 1. So we've ranged all the way down, so we don't have as wide a scope and as many stages of folding. Let's just sweep the fold and see how this sounds. First, I need to take the mix over to fully wet. And I like that we can set that to be much softer and not totally bonkers like some wave folders can be. And this will go totally bonkers too. But with the range all the way down, it doesn't go totally ballistic. With the folding set just over half, I'll sweep the range, and there's quite a lot of dynamic range on this, so be careful in headphones and speakers. And let's play with fold. Now let's fold the other input just quickly. Of course, the magic is that we have two inputs, so with both, just adjust the tuning of my just lose that beating by getting these a little bit more in tune. So let's play around with some modulation. Now I'm going to set the folding to not actually cut off, so the VCA is open at least a little bit, and here's an envelope to folder mount. Single input, range all the way down. Now I'm going to use an LFO to actually crossfade between the two inputs. Let's try that on, say, the mix. And I'm going to use sample and hold to modulate the blend of the two ins. And let's just play with that range. And just to emphasize how good and how smooth this kind of lower rate wave folding is, I'm going to pitch my input down a little bit lower. And let's fold that. I love folders on low pitch triangles. So that's a quick look at the sounds. Let's get into some further patches. So we've heard the crossfold over simple inputs, a triangle and a sine. Let's actually hear a more complicated input. This is input 1, which is the top trace on the scope. It's a bit hard to see this because it's pitch sequence, so the waves are flying around. But there's modulation over the shape of the wave, the skewing and slope of the wave, and some really mild filtering. That's also the output, because I'm coming out of the crossfader, which is on input 1, and the mix is all the way down. So let's just listen to the input. So it's pitch sequenced, and the waves are being modulated. First of all, let's just see what folding it sounds like. And the range. Let's try an envelope into fold over that. And we could set the mix input to actually take its dry input from the VCA, as we've said. So let's set a static amount of folding. Pretty full on, I like it. And we're going to use the mix with it set to V for the VCA and use this like a VCA. Now I have noise at input 2. I like this almost like square clipped distortion. It's not just wave folding. At the higher ranges, we do get some crazy kind of distortion and clipping as well. I'm going to use an attenuated gate pattern to add in some noise as accents. Let's try an LFO over, say, folder mount. So there's a ton of potential tones in this thing. Let's set this against some drums. So that's adding some dynamics, folding, shaping, distortion, clipping, and using it like a VCA, and using an animated, already modulated input. Let's move on to some lower pitch drones. So for this patch, I wanted to look at something low and droning, and we're also going to add some effects. But obviously it's important you hear this dry first. So this is my input, a sequenced low triangle wave. Now one nice little trick with no second input, you can also use the crossfader like a VCA, because if I crossfade to nothing, it's kind of like using a VCA. So here's an LFO to that. Now I'm going to set a fold amount that I like. And of course the input of nothing to the folder also means the output is still acting like a VCA by folding to nothing and back. Removing that for a second, let's add an LFO to fold. Just turn up the amount of modulation. Bring in the modulation of the crossfader again. And some modulation of the range. Also going to modulate the mix. It's got lots of tone shaping and dynamic sounding folding. Let's add in some effects to kind of complete, as if a patch is ever complete, this kind of drone patch. So let's check out the crossfold on drums, and also audio rate modulating some of these parameters. So here's my dry percussion and drum input. And let's just do some manual crossfolding. Well, no crossfolding, this is only one input, so folding. The mix allows you to do some parallel folding and distortion, so even with really extreme settings, you could just have a little bit. For some background colour. Now again, this crossfader could be used like a VCA. So with audio rate modulation, we can do some AM style sounds. That's now just a static oscillator. We could audio rate modulate the folding or the range, which is more extreme, or the mix. We'll come back to audio rate modulation. We could use a pitch sequence to the range, just for a bit of variety. Let's audio rate modulate the crossfold, or crossfade, sorry. And then in time, modulate the oscillator, providing this audio rate modulation. Now, as we're modulating the crossfading, and this is set to XF, if I set this to 1, We can just have input 1 totally dry. But the crossfader will still feed through the fold circuit. So it's a great way of getting extra synth-like character, overtones and distortion over drums as well. Thanks for tuning in to check out the Antimatter Audio Crossfold, Crossfader, VCA, 8-stage wave folder with added clipping and distortion. Totally ace, loads of different tricks and ways to use this thing. Hit like, subscribe, comment, be sure to ask any questions in the comments. Go support me on Patreon if you'd like extra content. Cheers.